incredible. Here's what caught me by surprise. Look, I knew we were going to settle because they had said they wanted to settle. They had fought us for 2.5 years in court. We actually had a hearing in Toronto, and two of our lawyers slept in from Calgary, and I went down to the court, and it was adjourned for this reason and that reason. For 2.5 years, they battled us, and then they came to us and said, fine, we'll unblock you. And we actually, this is the part that caught me by surprise, it was issued in what's called a consent order, which, as you saw, is the actual court judge issuing an order. The only difference between that and a judgment on his own is that both sides agreed to it, and he just gave his imprimatur. But it looked so official, and it really was a court order, and it really is binding, and he really will be paying us $20,000 in costs. And so I think it became sort of the perfect storm for a media story, because you had Stephen Guilbeault, who's a controversial cabinet minister, always in trouble. You had me and Rebel News, who are, some people would say, controversial. You had Twitter, which all journalists are obsessed with. You had blocking, which all journalists know about. You had a court order and a $20,000 cost award. This was like catnip to the media. And it had an enormous amount of media coverage today. You just take a look. You could see the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the National Post, and most importantly, the Canadian Press, which, as you may know, is a newswire service. They write one story, and almost every newspaper in Canada subscribes to the Canadian Press, so they all ran that story. I think it must have run in 100 different newspapers and news websites. And by the way, I have to say that most of the reporting was neutral or even positive. I mean, I don't know how you could spin a story. Stephen Guilbeault capitulated. He agreed to unblock me. He agreed to pay $20,000. I don't really know how you spin that as bad news for me. I like the fact that the media party generally didn't say far right or controversial. They just said Rebel News. It was actually pretty fun. I think one of the most interesting things, I just want to show you this in the consent order, is that Stephen Guilbeault, for the rest of his political career as an MP, has to keep me unblocked, which is sort of interesting because we sued him because he was with the government. But for the rest of his life, if he's an MP, he must unblock me. I thought that was quite a muscular order. Anyways, not only did we get a lot of general media coverage, but a few civil liberties law experts weighed in too. Here's Professor Michael Geist of the University of Ottawa, who's a well-known, very moderate, very learned scholar in issues just like this. And he covered the issue in great detail and said that he believed that it was pretty obvious that the government settled with us and agreed to the consent order because they knew they were going to lose. And so they sort of made the decision, lose in a consent order rather than lose at the end of a trial where it would be a much more painful loss. Here's Kara Zwiebel of the pretty much defunct or slumbering, shall we say, Canadian Civil Liberties Association. I don't know where they've been for the past 5 years, by the way. Apparently they still exist. And she weighed in, I guess you could say mildly supportive, saying she wished it had been at the end of a trial as opposed to a consent order so it could be binding. Okay, thanks very much for your nice wishes. You want to actually get off the couch and do something for civil liberties in Canada. I mean, civil liberties is your middle name, but alas, they've been doing other things. They've been busy doing other things. Anyways, that's Rebel News for you. We do the civil liberties work that the Civil Liberties Association won't do. But my point is, not only did this get widespread media coverage, it got coverage from people I would call legal experts. And not just that, but the independent media obviously loved it. The Western Standard, Epoch Times, all sorts of independent journalists wrote about this because they hate the fact that the government is so censorship-oriented. My main tweet announcing this victory, last I checked, it had 2 million views and impressions. That's a lot. 2 million, as I later joked, that's the most successful thing Stephen Guilbeault has ever done in his political career. He's never done anything more resonant than losing a lawsuit to Rebel News. It was pretty delightful. But I'm here in Dubai. I didn't expect this to happen right now. I didn't expect it to happen on court letterhead, not just letterhead. It's a court order. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention when my lawyer told me about it. But watching the massive media coverage from afar, I felt something going on. I felt like the winds were changing direction. I felt, and I think it was when moderate, neutral scholars like Michael Geist were weighing in, I thought, we're not the quote fringe here. Everyone sort of hates the fact that politicians block citizens, but no one really did anything about it. I should say a few years ago, a citizen of Ottawa sued the mayor, Jim Watson, for blocking him, but that never really went anywhere. It sort of petered out. Maybe what happened there is what Guilbeault tried to do with me. I think I mentioned it in that video I recorded yesterday. They agreed to unblock me. They agreed to pay $20,000 in costs, but they wanted me to sign a confidentiality agreement to keep it all secret. No thanks. I'm not interested in a secret government making secret decisions. The whole point here is that the government should be shamed for being so censorious. So I think that that's the difference. And I guess what I'm saying is I sensed even from half a world away that the mood in Canada is changing. And in fact, the only voice of any size, and I give her too much credit, who was sort of against this settlement was Catherine McKenna. Do you remember her? A footnote in history, I think you would say. She used to be the environment minister until Trudeau got tired of her, and then she sort of skulked off to the United Nations, where I don't even know what she does there, but she got some, fake job, patronage job. But here's what she said on Twitter. She was outraged. She said, the idea that politicians can't block trolling people and organizations who harass them for profit is absurd and frankly dangerous. There is no constitutional right to harass and spread lies and hate. But let me tell you, it has real life consequences for politicians and their families. What is she talking about? I didn't harass Stephen Guilbeault. I barely mentioned him. I think in my entire life, I tagged him in 3 criticisms. And I of course I criticized him, but that's dangerous. The real life consequences for politicians and their families. That reminds me of Justin Trudeau saying, oh, you don't know how hard it is being a politician these days. Yeah, mate, it's a little bit easier being a politician making, a cabinet minister makes almost $300,000. It's a little bit easier for cabinet ministers these days than for severely normal people who are one paycheck away from not making rent. Here's Catherine McKenna. You have no idea how hard it is. Yeah, just outrageous. Let me read one more tweet. She said, and what normal person, especially women, Indigenous peoples, minorities, members of LGBTQ2 plus community would want to go into politics? Well, a lot, actually. I should remind you that Catherine McKenna herself was a defendant in this same lawsuit. She had blocked Sheila Gunn-Reid. We would have crushed her in court too, other than the fact that she, bowed out of politics and we weren't interested in suing her as a private person. So I think that's one reason she was squawking so much. I want to read one more tweet. Forgive me. Catherine McKenna is just, I think she's so instructive of the problem here. She said, there is no constitutional right to harass and spread lies and hate. But let me tell you, it has real life consequences for politicians and their families. Now, obviously, she was talking about Rebel News, but we don't harass anyone. We've never harassed anyone in our life. If she means to chirp at someone on Twitter, that's not harassment. That's called freedom of speech. You're allowed to heckle politicians. In fact, I think you should, to express yourself and to keep politicians in their place. When she says to spread lies and hate is illegal, no, it's not actually, because it's a matter of opinion if someone is lying or not. Here's Catherine McKenna drunk in a bar in Newfoundland, laughing on camera about how she regularly lies. This is Catherine McKenna boasting about lying for a living. Remember this video?
I actually gave them some real advice. I said that if you actually say it louder, we've learned in the House of Commons, if you repeat it, if you say it louder, if that is your talking point, people will totally believe it.
Yeah, I hate that, and I think it's deeply unethical, and I think Catherine McKenna is a deeply unethical person. You know a lot about her by the fact that she eats dog meat. I don't mean to emphasize that, but I think how someone treats animals and dogs gives you a window into their soul. I think Catherine McKenna is an odious person, but I'm not saying that should be illegal. It shouldn't be illegal for her to lie, and it shouldn't be illegal for her to eat dogs. She does both, and I'm not saying to ban it. She, on the other hand, says that she wants to ban people who lie, and what else does she call it? spread hate. Well, the amount of hatred that the Liberal Party has spread against Canadians who they don't like is shocking. Not just hatred, but deploying police, seizing bank accounts, throwing the country under martial law. It's just absurd. But the point is, we haven't done any of that. If we had, Twitter's terms of service would have knocked us out. Which brings me to my point. I think what we managed to accomplish against Stephen Guilbeault was surprisingly successful. Not that I'm surprised that we won in court. I sort of thought we might. But it was surprisingly resonant with not only normal people, but with the most powerful lobby group in Canada, the media party. Other than Catherine McKenna, I haven't seen anyone say they're upset with this. Some people say, well, I don't really like Rebel News, but this is a good thing. Of course it's a good thing. Because that attitude Catherine McKenna has, that she's the only one who's allowed to lie. She's the only one who's allowed to hate you. Who the heck is she? And who the heck is she to censor you from getting access to a government Twitter account? Again, I'm not talking about her personal account, her personal family Facebook page. I'm not interested in that. I'm saying, who the heck is she to say that someone that she hates, someone that she lies about, should be banned from receiving a government service?